Next, we have Danna M. Gutierrez, Lanza, PhD candidate and graduate research assistant from the MSU School of Planning, Design, and Construction again. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So just again to very quickly introduce myself, my name is Danna Gutierrez Lanza. I'm actually not a PhD candidate yet. I'm a PhD student. Soon, very soon. That should be in the fall. So I'm a PhD student at Michigan State. I study urban and regional planning, but I have background in both architecture and sociology. And I do housing studies, right? And I was invited to this presentation by Zina, our first presenter today. And she said, well, are you doing any work on, aging, housing? Like who could be doing any of that work? And it just so happens that I'm doing policy evaluation work in the context of my, coursework and my dissertation on ADUs as a housing typology. And it inevitably, is a cross-reference with aging, and aging in place, right? And the very interesting thing for me is, well, first, as an international student, when I came to the US, and especially when I came to MSU, I've lived in different apartment complexes, and the majority of them have senior homes next to them. I had never seen so many senior homes in my proximity. They are almost unthinkable. Like where I come from, right? Our elders age in place. They age in our homes and with us. And now that I think back, right, and I'm able to process my early years through this understanding of what housing and the possibilities of housing do for us, my grandfather was just about retired when I was born. And so he was one of our caretakers, right? He lived at home with us. He still does. 30 years later, yeah, I'm 30 years old. And so my grandfather still lives at home with us, right? He's not always the easiest to get along with, right? Sometimes he just wakes up in a bad mood, but he's at home with us. He is part of our household. He is part of our caregiving structure, right? And one of my earliest memories is because he's very much a poetry enthusiast. He had this rocking chair, this wooden rocking chair. And when I was about 5, he got me a miniature one so that I could sit on the porch with him. And my mom and my dad were out at work, and my grandfather, I did have someone look out for me, and they would get me ready for the afternoon. And what would happen is my grandfather would pull out both his adult-sized chair and my miniature-sized chair, and he would sit with me and just, tell me folk stories or stories that, gosh, I don't know where he knew them from, but they were very nice. And he would tell me poems, right? He would read to me, and we would kind of just see the afternoon go by that way. And now that I think back, I really do understand that it's both a cultural matter, but also, the effort that we put into kind of retrofitting the house as we grew in numbers so that we could all fit, right? And we would all part of this space. So just what is aging in place? And I think this is a very quick but very important definition. And the highlights for me is that we should allow older adults to live in their homes or communities safely, independently, and comfortably, right? Just, well, no matter your age, once you're in that range of senior citizen, your income or your ability level. Ability level is something that's really changing, right? As generations change and we kind of have other things that we're interested in and we understand. Just as Daya was saying, at 60, you're not as old as a 60-year-old was 30 or 40 years ago, right? But we're still aging, and it comes with difficulties in moving, health, and so the considerations are important. But this matters, and it matters increasingly because in Michigan, and let's talk about Michigan, 65 years or older continue to be the fastest growing population segment. but not just in Michigan, in the US, in the world. Between the 2010 census and the 2020 census, that percentage grew about 2.4%, which does not sound like much, but in absolute numbers, it is a huge amount of people. And it is something that will only keep happening because this, large generation of baby boomers, they're growing older. And the other component to this is that younger generations are now fewer in numbers. So there's less, younger caretakers to look after our elders. And so we want to make sure that we have spaces and communities that then let you take care of yourselves, right? Because without intentionality, we have environments that are unfit. They diminish our sense of independence, they diminish our social connections. And I think one thing that definitely revealed that was COVID, right? Older adults were left isolated. We had to isolate you. There were also, a group that was very prone to the disease and its fatalities. And so you are removed from your communities, your families, your connections, and that sense of loneliness is also an increasing cause of like chronic health conditions. There, I would say not just for seniors, but definitely for all of us, right? In a world where we are increasingly looking for meaningful connections. But aging in place is about a lot of things. It's not, Zena and Zena walked us through it, outdoor spaces, buildings, and housing, but there's also matters of transportation, communication, civic participation, and employment. Zena mentioned that, right? I do see that around campus a lot. Senior citizens are big volunteers, and there's events on campus, and that's very interesting. We're talking about community and healthcare, respect and social inclusion, and even participation in matters of governance, right? And I think that's the call to action that Dea ended her presentation with. And so for me, aging in place, thinking about aging in your communities is a good way, or is like a good arena to think about both that social participation, but also in building better environments for ourselves, right? What does aging in place look like? And we're talking now about accessory dwelling units, like as a very specific typology, right? As a way of building houses. And so this very interesting schematic here shows you a menu, right? It's a very interesting menu. Where can an ADU go within a plot of a single family home, right? We can be above the garage. We can be detached. That one's interesting, right? Just kind of like your own little place. Actually, accessory dwelling units, while that's like their official name, people do know them a lot like granny flats or in-law suites, right? Kind of like you get the sense. They're self-contained living units, right? You are essentially downsizing, but also staying in place within your family and your household, providing and keeping those connections while still maintaining your sense of independence, right? You can be now a roommate. Those changes in relationship are interesting. My mom and I were roommates very recently, like when you're like an adult child now and that relationship changes. But the important part is that these units are thought to be independent living spaces, right? We're going to have all the essential components of a home, the bedroom, the rest area, bathroom, kitchen, living area. We could be attached to the homes. We can be in the basement, a converted garage, right? Picking within the menu just has to do kind of like with preference, but also with terms of mobility, right? Kind of like how much do you want to be moving between the main unit and the accessory dwelling unit or the granny flat. And so now aging in place, so aging in your community, let's say you want to stay in East Lansing, it's not just staying in East Lansing, it really is staying in your home, it is staying with your family. And so it was interesting to me, Dea said the not in my backyard people are showing up. And it turns out that I really believe that aging in your home looks like yes in my backyard, right? And it is that place then where we're going to see social and civic participation because we're going to have to show up to our communities, right? And where decisions are being made and said, you know what, we need housing, and housing can look like this. It can look like granny flats because we are thinking about ourselves as we age. We're thinking about the changes in the structure of families, right? We want to make sure that we provide these living spaces and promote that sense of independence. Just to name some of the benefits, right? We talked about them: closeness to family, privacy and independence, preservation of family net worth, and cost saving, right? It's expensive, well, kind of just to be around, but it's expensive to be aging, right? It's everything's expensive. And when you're still part of, like the built environment of your household and your family, you can kind of like spread those costs, or bring them down. You're part of the caretaking network when there's children involved, right? They're customizable. So the menu that I just showed you kind of is the relationship of the ADU with the main structure of the home. But what that home looks like, that's completely up to you. And isn't that just like a fantastic project to have in mind? As an architect, I think that's just a great hobby. What will my ADU look like? And you can put pen to paper and kind of design that for yourself, right? Intergenerational connections, like the one that I am now able to look back into, right? Of my grandfather quite literally having a tiny rocking chair built specifically for me. It was still in my house by the time I was 20, but we just didn't have anyone to use it. So I don't know what happened to it. It was there for a very long time. And so if aging at home, aging in place is yes in my backyard. I kind of wanted to wrap up kind of giving you a sense of what this looks like in general as a like permitting process, but also within East Lansing, because we do have options, right? So definitely it's about zoning laws and building codes, permits and approvals. So again, showing up, right, in decision-making places. So City Hall could be planning meetings. Those aren't always fun, but we can make a day out of it. We're gonna think about planning and design. We're gonna think about construction, inspection, and compliance. And for what was so interesting for me is, as I was thinking about these, is that this is civic participation, right? Now you've gone from thinking about that built environment in your home, and now you're also moving into these other aspects that are going to keep you within your community, right? Showing up to these spaces. In East Lansing, I'm going to say quick, I'm not entirely sure, but it's 5 steps, right? There's a planning staff that you're able to talk to. And I actually saw the program, and I think that someone's actually talking about the process. So
I got stuck in Chicago at the airport. So
oh no, that's the speaker we're missing.
Yeah. No.
Oh no, that's unfortunate. There's planning staff, right, who I'm sure will be happy to talk to you. You can set up a meeting, you submit your application, right? You apply for your permits. And in fact, one of the very interesting stuff is that if you are doing the work yourself, if you or your family members are like do-it-yourself kind of person, the permit comes to under your name, right? And it's within your house. And so you have a lot of like leniency in how you work with that, right? And so property owners can request those permits in their name, do the work themselves, right? And now you not only have an idea of housing in place, not only are you doing civic participation, but you have an intergenerational project that's building your ADU within the home, right, where you're staying. So yes, in my backyard, go out and visit City Hall and city planning commissions and make the change so that you can see these units, right, for yourselves, for others, and allow yourselves the opportunity to stay at home and age in place.